I'm super excited to be sharing this information with you because it has been transformative for me in my personal life and also in my work life. And there is not that many things that come to mind off the top of my head that kind of play into both sides. So I want to walk you through the material, and that should take about 30 minutes. Shane, are we still good on the 30 minutes?
Yes, yeah, please take as much time as you need, and we'll still have plenty of time for discussion afterwards.
Okay, all right, that sounds great because I really want to give you guys something practical. And so we'll be doing some like actual hands-on work right now. And then there might be some things that you want to do afterwards, but I really want you to walk out of here with some of this information and that processing already done. Okay, just a little bit about me for those of you that don't know me. And even if you do, you may not know this about me, that when I was working at Deloitte, my first job out of school, I was a change management consultant for them in New York City. And I had this view of the world that what made me successful in high school and in college, just that heads down work, you know, getting the task done, was going to be the same thing that would get me progression in my career, advancement in the fulfillment even of my career. And sometimes I found myself just sort of, you know, powering through it. And then I thought, well, you know, I just somehow thought things would change. And then I ended up doing the same thing at PwC and McKinsey and IBM, and just didn't feel, I just felt like something was missing, and thought that it was harder than it kind of had to be. And not to say there weren't times where I felt like I really shined and times where I felt in that flow, but in general, I would say that I was struggling, sometimes mentally, sometimes emotionally, occasionally physically, just with, you know, working long hours. And then something clicked, and I realized that there are these strengths that we each bring to a situation that are unique to each of us. So me, Bijal Choksi, like not a white older male, not necessarily fitting in with everyone else that was around me. I still had this unique strengths that I brought that they would not be able to utilize without me. And that made me feel great when I got to do those. And so that was the shift for me when I realized about those strengths. And today I want you to, if you haven't already gone through an exercise like this, you know, I want you to have that same aha, that same epiphany, at least in one aspect of your career, and walk out of here understanding what some of your comparative advantages are, what your strengths are, and then we'll even go into some specific situations in how you can use them. So, you know, whether you want to master this to serve your clients, or whether you just want to build your business, it is the same skill set. And so you can take it from one area of your life to another. And knowing your strengths, for me, really provided two main things. So one is that it allowed me to show up more powerfully, because it was almost like it's like just saying that, you know, you're right-handed. It's like not like you're boasting about it, but you're just saying that. And you can do that with your strengths too. And then number two, it also improved the way others perceive me. So I no longer felt like I had to follow somebody else's model in how they were accomplishing something. And that was so empowering, you know, especially as a minority woman in a predominantly white culture, right? And so knowing that just provided confidence, and it really did shift how others were viewing me. And then the other positive is that it's more fun. It feels good when you're not struggling. So, okay, so let's dive into this. This is just, for those of you that don't know me, this is a little bit about my background. I just pulled it from a deck that I submitted in response to an RFP, but I'm not going to cover really any of this, but I will just say that I've had a lot of clients. I come from the corporate world, and my three key values are serve, learn, and connect. And when you can hone in on your values and your strengths, that can be really powerful. Sorry, that sort of relates to a different workshop that I do around identifying your values, but there is a tie in there. So I just want to, again, thank you all for being here. And I know you could be potentially just binge watching Netflix, and we all do it at times, but you're here. And that, to me, demonstrates that you're a learner, and that that you're on this journey of learning, the journey of your progression. And you go at it step by step by step. And so I want to honor you for being here tonight and adding one more step into your process, your journey. I do encourage you all to take notes and be an active participant in this, because you could be just sitting back and kind of passively listening to it and letting it just roll over you. And that's one way you could go through it. And then we're just sitting here on what's tonight, Thursday night, just having this little conversation, or you can really internalize it and keep an open mind and test it out in a really light, fun spirit of experimentation. So here's what we're going to cover. I'm going to share the framework for using your strengths. We will go through exploring your strengths, and then I will show you 4 different strategies on how you can use some of these strengths immediately. And I do mean immediately. I want you to commit as we go through this. I want you to commit to trying one of those 4 strategies tomorrow. It doesn't add additional time. You're already doing tasks related to your career, your job, and just go ahead and try one of them. And then reflect on how it went, because nobody becomes a master overnight in a new strategy. So take that leap of faith and try it out. So the framework is 3 steps. I love the number 3. The first one is awareness, because really, how are you going to take action on something unless you are aware that needs to be taken? How are you going to use your strengths if you don't know what they are? So that's the first step. I think that one's pretty apparent. The second one is, I call focus. And so that's about, how do you focus in on your strengths? And I'll walk through a process on how you can pick one of your strengths and then focus in on it. And then the third step is refining. So there are nuances in using your strengths. It's not like the image that comes to my mind is Flash, the superhero. I have a 15-year-old, and it's one of the few things that he wants to do with me. So we watch Flash together. And so Flash, when he first got his power, when he realized it, he was overusing it. He was like running into walls, right? Because he didn't know how to use it intentionally and be powerful with it. And so that falls into that refine bucket. A few other points in the refine area are, well, what do you do about your weaknesses, right? Are we just ignoring them? And the short answer is no, you're not just ignoring them. There's a process I have around that too, but every strength does have that dark side, like Greta said during the introduction. The other part about refining is, how do you share your strengths, right? How do you talk about them without being boastful to your clients, to your team members? And I pose it that it is important to share it. It is important to communicate it either explicitly or implicitly. Otherwise, you're leaving some of the positive outcomes on the table. And then third is around relationships, right? So how do you use it? So if you have one strength and then another person has a completely different strength, how does that mesh together, right? How do different strengths play together? So that's kind of in the refinement. So for tonight, with our limited time, we are going to focus on the awareness and the focus steps. And if you are interested in the refined steps, I am developing an online course that will dive into that in a lot more detail, launching that in June. So we'll send out, I think Shane will include my email if you want to join. I have an email newsletter that I send out that announces new products that I'm releasing. And I also do this one-on-one. So I do this for corporations, I do this for individuals. And so this is where we really dive in to your particular situation and talk about which one of your strengths would be the most powerful and impactful for you. So that's the framework. Basic question that I always get, well, what exactly is a strength? Like, what does that mean? And a strength is an action or a thought that comes kind of naturally to you. And it's something that you look forward to, something you're energized by, something you would love to learn more about. And so they're verbs. So strengths, the way that I'm defining them, these are verbs. So these are things like creating, organizing, spreadsheeting. I know that's not a verb, but I do like to spreadsheet, so I'm making it a verb. These are actions that you are taking. And they are more of a state versus a trait. And so what I mean by that is that it doesn't it doesn't change really day after day or week after week. These are things that are inherent to you, that are probably a combination of maybe some percentage of genes, some percentage of history, experience, such culture, just a myriad of different things that has brought you to where you are right now as a mature adult. And so you've got the state, and then you've got skills and knowledge. And this is something that people sometimes get confused by, so I just want to highlight it. So you could learn a new skill. You can gain additional knowledge on a topic, but it doesn't mean that it's a strength of yours. So simple example, Shane brought up PowerPoint. So, Shane might learn how to put together PowerPoint slides because he needs to, but it doesn't mean, even if he's really good at it, that it's a strength of his. It may not be something that he is going to look forward to. Maybe he likes more of that whiteboarding type of thing and not going in and worrying about formatting and putting in a picture and those kinds of things. So that hopefully clarifies a little bit about what a strength is. One other distinction is that strengths are not necessarily the items that you are best at. So what I mean by that is that just because you're good at something, it doesn't mean that it's a strength of yours. So for example, I'm like a master organizer and scheduler, and it's a no-brainer for me. Is that a strength of mine? Definitely not. I absolutely hate that. Like I would love to I outsource as much of that as I can, because even though I'm good at it, it is not something that energizes me. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, the number one struggle that I see in people as they are starting to use their strengths is something that we can thank Mother Nature for. And that is the inherent negativity bias that we are born with. And there was a reason, they say, for this negativity bias, because in evolutionary survival purposes, we needed to focus on what was wrong in our environment. What was wrong with me? If I'm not running fast enough, if I'm the last one of the pack running, then I need to improve that so that I am not attacked and so I survive. And our brains have not evolved at the same pace as our society. So we may think we're all sophisticated, but really what's going on in here hasn't changed that much over the years. And so we have to really intentionally get over that negativity bias. And how that plays out in strengths is that people tend to focus on their weaknesses. And then they try to improve their weaknesses. So let's say, you're not a great public presenter, but you want to be better at it. Somebody else in your office is great at it, and you think it would really help you. And so you work at it. Maybe you go to Toastmasters, maybe you take an online class, maybe you record yourself. You're working and you're working and you're working at it, and you would make incremental improvements for sure. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be improving our weaknesses, but I will say that if you spent that same amount of time on a strength of yours, you would make progress by leaps and bounds. The way I like to explain it is, if you think about a tree, you've got these major branches that come out of it, and each of your strengths is like one of those really solid branches that are coming out of the tree. And then every time you build a skill, every time you work at it, you get this little offshoot of additional tree branches on it, which only makes that strength even stronger for you. Versus focusing in on a weakness does not give you that same payoff. So the main takeaway around strengths is that I want you to include more of those strengthening activities in your everyday life and at work. The other takeaway is that these are unique to you. And unfortunately, we don't necessarily value something that comes easy to us. We tend to think that if we focus on something we're not as good at and work really hard at it, that incremental change is amazing, woo! But actually, if we're working on our strengths and we make huge improvements, value that. So get over that negativity bias in the brain and value your unique strengths. Okay. Step one is identify your strengths. How do you know that an action is a strength of yours? I get asked that as well. And so I have a little cheat sheet for you. So this is called Look for the Signs. So you will know that an action is a strength of yours if you meet these criteria. S is for success. When you do it, you feel effective. Maybe you've heard from other people that you kind of have a gift for this. You may have earned some sort of recognition for that activity. Instinct is the I. So before you do it, you kind of look forward to it. Like for me and the spreadsheets, and I say kinda because I actually do look forward to it, but I get made fun of sometimes because of my love of spreadsheets. And Greta, you know who I'm talking about here. But I look forward to it. And so I do volunteer for that activity. And it is these type of strengthening activities. When you check in with yourself, you'll get this kind of like, it's like the opposite of having butterflies in your gut. It's more like like I got this. The G is for growth. And while you're doing it, you kind of feel curious. You feel inquisitive. You feel focused. You're more likely to go into that flow state. I'll continue with my nerdy example of the spreadsheet, but I like to learn formulas. And so if I can't figure something out, I might, go to the help, and I want to learn something. And so that is where that growth. So if you want to learn about something, it is an indicator that might be surrounding a strength of yours. N is for needs. And so it satisfies some kind of need of yours. After you've done it, you feel fulfilled. You feel like it was you, that it was authentic. And you get some sort of satisfaction from it. Other people may not understand it, but you get some satisfaction for it. I was leading a workshop for a strength-based workshop yesterday for a leadership team of 3. And one person hates to do kind of that iterative back and forth, like after the idea is done. He does not like to then go back and forth with other people and make those incremental changes, which you really need to do in order to have a final product. But that is so draining for him. But then he found out that somebody else on his team loves that process. And she doesn't like that initial step of like that white space. That does not work for her. And so that's a way where he could not understand how she could enjoy it. And she couldn't understand how he could enjoy just that white space. And that's where that uniqueness to you comes in. All right, well, now it is your turn. So pull out your journal and start jotting down, if you haven't already, what are some of those activities that you think might be your strengths?
Bijal, is this from the list, from the test, or just generically we're supposed to list?
This is generically, yeah. This has nothing to do with the assessment. The assessment will give you your top 2 strength roles, but it doesn't actually identify your strengths until you go through it and you pick out those verbs. So you don't need that for this.
Oh, okay, great, thanks.
So, and as you're thinking about this, I compiled, I have a whole list of different ones in case you are stuck. So you guys go ahead and get started. I'm gonna go get my 100 different verbs and activities that I have, and I will start sharing those. I'll be right back. And we are a small enough group here, so if anybody has a question about what they're putting on their list, just unmute yourself and share it, or put it in, actually I cannot see chat while I'm sharing my screen, so really just put yourself off of mute and go ahead and ask your question.
My activities are broad. Should they be more narrow?
Give me an example.
Like I like teaching.
No, that's perfect.
Okay, that works. It doesn't have to be like gardening.
No, it doesn't. It can be.
I mean, it won't be gardening for me anyway, but.
No, that is great. So I'll read off a few just for inspiration. Assessing, arranging, planning, streamlining, organizing, drafting, solving, communicating, interviewing, mentoring, connecting, creating, coaching, packaging, reading, troubleshooting, training, testing, studying, revising, reviewing, recruiting, negotiating, measuring, managing, illustrating, explaining, and I could keep going, but I'll just stop there for now. So if you have your list, the next step is to go through that sign checklist if you haven't already. So of the activities that you've listed there, start ticking off. Do they meet that success criteria? Does it meet the instinct criteria and the growth criteria and the satisfying a need criteria? So I'll give you a minute or so to do that. So as you're doing that, I will just mention, since most of the people on the call are women, I have found that women have a harder time honing in on their strengths. And I could definitely go into my theories as to why that is, but I won't go there right now. If that's you, then, and you haven't taken the standout assessment, consider taking that. And I can send that link to Shane and he can send that out. And that might spur some additional thinking and get the wheels turning on what some additional strengths are for you. And then if you're really struggling with it, and especially on the application side, which we're going to go next, consider working with somebody like me or somebody else, or you can even, you can buy the book called Stand Out, which will also help you in identifying what those strengths are. Another book is called Go, Put Your Strengths to Work. And both of these are by Marcus Buckingham. He used to work at Gallup. He co-founded Strength Finders, which I know some of you have taken. And then he left that and he created Stand Out, mainly because it's more a representation of what you do. It's that action orientation, and it is, in my mind, more applicable to the workplace. And so it's been really successful in the corporate world. So Cisco uses it, Facebook uses it, and other large companies, because it really hones in on the strength and then how do you use it at work to be more effective. Any questions before we move on? Oh, I guess we're saving the questions for the end, but if anyone has something really burning specific about this slide, go ahead. Okay, great. So the second step is to then use those strengths that you just identified. And here too, I have got just an easy to follow process for you. And this one, the word to remember is free. So these are 4 different ways that you can start using your strengths. Okay, so the first one might seem obvious, but I'll tell you why it isn't. So the first one is focus, which is just zero in on one of your strengths. And the reason why this isn't quite as simple as you might think is that in that moment at work where you are triggered, you get a new project thrown your way. I know this has happened with Greta, right? You get something put on your plate and you are like, crap, I didn't sign up for this, or this isn't what I want, or that timeline is too tight. I don't have enough resources, whatever the situation is. And that moment when you're triggered is not the time when your caveman brain is going to think about what you're good at. It's going to start focusing in on the negative with the situation. And so you need to override that by intentionally thinking about one of your strengths and then thinking about how might you use that strength in this situation. It takes a little bit of practice. And it also helps if you have your strengths listed out somewhere, because in that moment when you are stressed out, or say, Ben, you have a a potential new client conversation that you're about to have, in that moment, your mind is already going and thinking about other things. You are not going to really use additional processing space in your brain to remember what your strengths are. So I really encourage people who are new to this to really have that listed down somewhere obvious, somewhere you can tap into. Maybe it's a Post-it that you keep on your laptop or somewhere on your desk, just to start, being able to just really quickly tap into it when you need to. All right, the second one is release. And this has to do with using that strength to get your job done better. So I guess I sort of combined the focus and the release in that example that I gave you about being stressed with a project at work. So I think I really touched on that first bullet point under release already. So the second one is about proactively thinking about what are new situations at work that you can put yourself in to use that strength more. So for example, in that example I gave about the workshop I did yesterday in the space, the gentleman that liked that white space, he might talk to a different team. He might just over water cooler, well, now we don't have water cooler talk, but over a Zoom, if he finds out about another initiative going on in the organization, he might proactively reach out to that person and say, hey, I love that initial first meeting where we start brainstorming and filling that whiteboard with ideas. Could you use another voice in that meeting or on that project? Now, all of a sudden, that person that he reached out to, is like, wow, you actually want to do something outside of your narrow focus? That's impressive. Okay, could be leadership potential. That could be somebody who wants to learn more about the organization so that they could be more effective overall. It might be somebody who just personally wants to gain a new skill in that other area of the department. But either way, now there's other people in the organization that's looking at that original gentleman in a positive way. And he feels great because he loves that. So to him, that part of it is not even work. Okay, the third one is educate. And how do you learn new skills to build this strength? So going back to what I was saying before about you can really get the biggest bang for the buck in terms of your effort if you focus it in on an area that you are already strong. So what are some new skills that you can learn? Maybe you talk to, if you're in a corporation, maybe you talk to your manager about the upcoming training and why you think one would be really beneficial to help you develop this strength. Or who can you talk to about how you can more proactively use those strengths? And so you can gain skills and knowledge around a strength. And I think it's important to really approach it from this mindset of curiosity and that growth mindset, where just because something is a strength of yours, it doesn't mean that you're a master of it. And I'm an organizational psychologist, but I don't know everything about the brain. I'm constantly learning. I don't know everything about strengths. I attend additional workshops. I have gone through a 5-month program. I've done some in-person training. I continue to develop in that area. So that's educate. And then the other E is expand. So how can you maybe expand your career and your job in order to play to that strength more? Is there a way that you can maybe share that with other people? If documenting is a strength of yours, well, maybe you document something even though it's not in your role, but you share it with others. And then how can you expand your job in order to make better use of your strengths? Because if you're good at something, it'll actually be in a welcome expansion, and you won't necessarily look at it as, crap, I need to do an extra hour in this. Because if it's something that you feel good about doing, great to do more of that. And then hopefully shifting away from some of those other tasks that are not as much of a strength for you. All right, so it's your turn. How are we doing on time? I don't have, Shane, can you just maybe unmute yourself and just let me know?
Sure, yeah, if we could wrap up in the next 10 minutes or less, that would be great.
Okay, yeah, absolutely, perfect. I think it should be about 5 minutes. So now it's your turn again. So pull out that notebook again and go ahead and start thinking about each of these 4 strategies. So the first one is choosing a strength. So take a look at your list that you did in step 1, and then proactively choose one that you think is really relevant for you at work right now. That would help you. And then commit right now, in this moment, to use that strength tomorrow. Not next week, use it tomorrow. And send me an email if you need some accountability. I'd love to hear from you. Second one is release. So you've chosen a strength, and for the release one, you could choose a different one if you want. But what is a strength that you can use to help you in an area, something you're struggling with? It could be motivation. It could be confidence. It could be things taking too long to get done. What's an area you're struggling with, and how might you intentionally pick a strength to help you with it? And I'm just pausing there on purpose just to give you a little bit of time to jot down your notes on that one. So the next one is educate. Is there a new skill that you can learn to use one of your strengths more? Is there someone who might help you use that strength in a different situation? Maybe there's a work buddy. Maybe there's somebody who you think is even better at that strength than you are. Somebody who's good at something would love to share their tips and strategies with someone else who's interested in it. Somebody asked me about some questions about an Excel spreadsheet. I would love it. I'm like, yes, welcome to my geekhood. Come on in. Let's figure this out together. And then the fourth one is expand. So think about how you can expand your career, whatever it is, in order to use that strength more.